HIIT, better known as high intensity interval training, has been hailed as a silver bullet for everything. The truth, it just is not. So you've heard a lot of things about high intensity interval training. You've heard that it can build muscle, that it's the best way to burn fat, that it can make your brain smarter, that it can make you do backflips. None of these things are true, in part because HIIT is often handled wrong and done incorrectly, and in part because it just isn't something that everybody needs to do. So we're gonna get away from HIIT, but first let's look at why and let's figure out how to make some adjustments.
When it comes to HIIT training, for the most part, people think it is the best possible cardiovascular exercise and protocol. And unfortunately, it doesn't meet the standard because it's misinterpreted by a lot of people and misapplied by a lot of coaches.
The thing that's very often forgotten in HIIT is the first two words there, high intensity. That is something different than what's happening in general when you're doing it in a group fitness class. That intensity means going incredibly hard during the interval you're training in. And what happens is that can't happen in, say, a 40-second window where you're training because you can't go as hard as you want. And then when you only have 20 seconds of recovery. So what we often have to do in HIIT is reverse that. In order to do true high intensity interval training and to get the heart rate effect we want, we've got to work for, say, 20 seconds and then rest for 40 seconds. Whether we're doing sprints, whether we're doing mountain climbers, whether we're doing the rower, that's the interval we have to train in. That isn't as fun. It doesn't feel as filler-ish when it comes to a group fitness class, and it's just not how it's done. And because of that, HIIT in the traditional sense, in the way we wind up training, it just doesn't produce the effects that we need.
Yeah, and let's be very specific. HIIT training is brutal when properly done. But for the most part, a lot of people can't get to doing it properly because ultimately they don't have a foundation of cardiovascular health. In the same way that you wouldn't start in the gym by doing a 1 rep max with your back squat on day 1, you shouldn't be doing a 1 rep max with your heart rate on day 1. You need a foundational level to work off of, and if you don't have that, your heart rate can be very erratic or feel high intensity when it's not actually high intensity.
The other major problem with HIIT is just how we're looking at it and what we think it does. Very often HIIT carries this idea around with it that somehow, because you've done HIIT training instead of, say, standard strength training, or instead of a longer cardio workout, or instead of just going for a run, you're going to continue to burn calories for several hours after your workout. This is something known as the afterburn effect, and it is one of the big sales pitches that a lot of gyms make when they tell you, hey, get in and try our HIIT workout, but it just doesn't really work that way.
No, specifically when it comes to anaerobic exercise or aerobic exercise without oxygen present, there is a concept called EPOC, or excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. Imagine using your credit card to pay off a debt, and then over time you have to pay with interest. That's in terms the theory of looking at paying that oxygen back over time. But research has shown that there is negligible differences, and it's not necessarily as beneficial and fruitful as you would imagine.
So those are the reasons why HIIT training isn't the best for you. Here are 3 different approaches that can help you build muscle, burn fat, and get all of the effects that you want.
If you want better options for your cardiovascular health over the long term, you're gonna wanna start with low intensity, steady state training. This is your standard protocol of walking or jogging at a slower interval, or finding something that is at a constant pace. What this does is it helps your heart rate learn to regulate itself within a certain level of intensity that over time you can work at that same intensity with a lower heart rate.
When we look at some of the muscle building promises of HIIT, let's move away from high intensity interval training to get those muscle building promises, and let's just focus on classic strength training. Let's attack multi-joint moves like the bench press, like your dumbbell or barbell row, like a squat or a deadlift. These exercises are, 1, going to burn a lot more calories than you think, especially once you start to load them aggressively, and they're gonna help build muscle. And the reality is, over the long haul of your training, we wanna build as much muscle as possible because at 40, we start to lose a lot of muscle if we don't maintain it. And 2, all that muscle we burn is actually gonna help us burn more fat over the course of our life. So let's get some more strength training into things.
For the most part, when people are doing high intensity interval training, they're actually doing moderate intensity, steady state training. Especially when you're looking at a group class format where someone is doing a high intensity interval training class, because you're working so abruptly and so quickly between stations in different spaces for a 40 to 60 minute time period, you're actually doing a form of steady state at a moderate to high intensity spot. True high intensity would be going at all out effort and then having a long rest period in between. What we would suggest is doing moderate intensity interval training, where you're focused between an effort or intensity level of anywhere between 70 to 90% of your max effort, and then making it deliberate with the type of additions you do, whether you're choosing a rower or an air bike or treadmill sprints, and putting yourself into a position to actually work the ups and downs of your heart rate. But there are really, really strategic ways you can plan this into your programming that makes it easy and effective to implement.
Exactly. Moderate intensity interval training actually translates really, really well to a lot of the bodyweight exercises that we normally associate with HIIT training, whether that is mountain climbers or lunges or jump squats. Moves like that translate very, very well to moderate intensity interval training. And this also winds up taking a much more natural form in your workouts as you might already plan them out. So if you're doing a strength workout, we can throw, say, 6 to 8 minutes of moderate intensity interval training, going 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off with a couple bodyweight exercises or with the rower at the end of the workout, so that we've tested a different energy system. On top of that, the truth is, all those times you were doing HIIT, there's a good chance you were actually doing moderate intensity interval training in terms of how hard you were going anyway. So those are 3 better alternatives than HIIT. They're gonna help you build all the muscle you're chasing, help you burn fat, help you burn calories, and help you feel great. So stop chasing that silver bullet of HIIT training. Let's get away from that. Attack our alternatives instead.